Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. No, it's very like cool. My closet. Yeah.
Are you in your closet?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Today? I would make a smart ass remark, but I won't.
You should.
It's time to come out of the closet, Courtney.
I know. It's time to emerge from the closet and be my true parenting self. Well, I hide from them. But they left. They're not here.
So is this your new workspace then?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I get to work on my PhD in a closet with some stuff. Oh.
I just muted. Hi, Morgan. Good morning.
Hello.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Good. You guys, it's almost over. You're almost done.
I know.
You should be so excited.
I am.
I'll speak for all of us.
Yeah, I'll speak for everyone. We're all excited.
That's for sure. I'm ready to have a little break. Is anybody gonna go do something really fun when they finish?
I'm going camping, but Isaiah and I are doing an ESL course, so I'll be camping and also doing homework, but that's okay. It's not the worst thing, right?
Yes, it's a lot easier to do that with one course than five.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Yeah. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning. Courtney, I had a question about the peer feedback due date.
Okay.
Or wait, no, sorry, Karla. I mixed up my
I was
post-it.
like, you can ask me,
yes.
but I don't know what you're talking about.
Karla, sorry, wrong post-it note. I got one for Courtney too. But for the peer feedback, is it the midnight, which is like 1 minute after 11:59 and the 29th, or is it like
did I say?
1 minute after 11:59 on the 30th?
Good question. It is due at 11:59 on the 30th.
The 30th. So then we only have 1 day to work with our feedback if someone waits till the last minute.
Oh, before you have to turn it in.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can talk about it. I think
Okay.
it's whatever is. If I give everybody until tomorrow at midnight, is there anybody? I think we have everybody now online. Is there anybody who feels like that would be impossible for them to give feedback on their partner's STEM unit before tomorrow at midnight? Oh, we don't have Evelyn. Evelyn's just now coming in, but I think we can do that. We'll just move it. So please make sure that you take a look at your peers, and we can, I can assign you partners. We can pick today in class, whatever works. And then you just need to, using the rubric, just give them some feedback on theirs by tomorrow at midnight. And I'll change that on the to-do list so that you know that. Any questions about that?
The one we submitted, I mean, our draft was pretty drafty. So, I mean, like, we had a lot to go on it. So, I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you're considering the feedback that you give to each other, really try to focus on the big picture, like does their lessons, like the order of their lessons make sense? Do the standards and how they're addressing them seem to make sense? Do you have any suggestions for, assessments that might be more aligned, that kind of thing? So you've already once given feedback on the backwards designs, is that correct? And if you want, it might be helpful that we keep the same partners so you already have kind of an idea of what they're doing. Will that be helpful?
So just continue to make comments and suggestions on the same paper that you did before.
Yeah.
Cool.
Does that sound like a a good plan. The purpose of that is really just to get a chance to see what other people are doing. And also when you're thinking about the rubric and how I'm going to evaluate as applied to someone else, then it helps you to really think about how you might change yours to better meet those expectations. So, so I don't anticipate, you know, that you will get really strong, like, change this on your feedback, but more just just the process of looking at others and the rubric.
Courtney, you said you had questions for me.
I think it was really for me,
Was
Courtney.
it for her? Well, I think she had 2 sticky notes,
Oh.
but
Okay.
I'm happy if they're all for you.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking over what your changes on Moodle have been since I last looked at it.
Because
So
we
for
have
our,
an in-class activity today.
what?
So we have an in-class activity today, so I opened some items.
Oh, I mentioned the weekly summary for
Huh?
this week. Are we doing it off of the sample readings or
No,
what?
so what I want you to do is, this is a little bit different. I just want an overview of your thoughts about the course and what you've learned and how you're going to implement that in your practice. This is not based on reading. It's based on the entirety of the class. So
Okay, yeah, that would be my other question, because in the syllabus it mentioned course reflection, but then in Moodle it mentioned weekly summary, and I was just
Yeah.
kind of confused.
Yep.
Okay.
Course reflection.
That's one of the challenges of doing things electronically, is you have so many places where you have titled something or referenced something and the name changes a little bit, and
I'm fixing it right now.
it is hard to keep those straight. So I will just, I think Leah and Evelyn might have been a little late to the conversation about the peer feedback on the STEM units. So I had originally said July 30th at midnight, but that only gives you 1 day really to incorporate that. So in discussing it today, we have concluded that we'll have the feedback due by tomorrow at midnight. And what I'm expecting in terms of feedback is kind of a big picture thing. So you're gonna give feedback on the same partner that you had for the backwards design. So whoever you gave feedback on for their backwards design, I want you to stick with that. And just take a look at their STEM unit, realizing those are pretty draft still, and kind of any big picture overview based on the rubric that will be used to evaluate the STEM units. So due by tomorrow at midnight, and I'll update the to-do list to reflect that. So.
And do you have a separate folder on the Google Drive to upload those to, or is it just going to the one place?
I did create a new folder for your STEM draft units. So that's where you'll put them, and that's where you'll give feedback on them. So what I would suggest is after class or during class today to just put a copy of what you have so far in that folder. And I'm gonna take the first half of the class today, and we're gonna kind of talk through our units. That's really what the purpose of the class was today, is to kind of just give a brief overview of what you're planning, and you can ask questions. Other people can maybe make comments or suggestions. And then after class or during class, I'll have you post those in that folder for feedback. And then Courtney will take the second half of class and has a fabulous activity plan for you. So, well, we are at the very last week, and boy, this is really, I will say, Courtney and I have taught this class for a few years, but we've had the last week to meet in person with our students. And generally, we have you doing a lot of showcasing what you have learned, and so we didn't get the opportunity to do that this summer, which has been an adjustment for us. And so, but based on what I have seen in the work that you've been doing in my class, I feel like there's been some good learning around best practices for science methods and STEM, and thinking about integrated teaching and looking at resources. So I'm looking forward to seeing how you kind of bring that all together in this unit. And one thing that I didn't mention that you have access to is a folder on the Google Drive that is labeled fact posters. And one of the activities that we do generally when we have the in-class person-to-person interactions is we look at formative assessments that are more aligned with an inquiry kind of teaching method. So we didn't get a chance to cover that in any detail in the science methods, and I don't think Courtney actually usually covers that also and applies it in the math section, and I don't think she either was able to really address that. So that is one of the things that is available on the Google Drive is some past presentations, poster presentations that were done by previous students that have some really fun, interactive, formative assessment ideas that might help you to really think about, how do I check in with my students as we're going through the unit to make sure they're making progress towards those learning targets, and that I don't get to the end and realize that half my class really missed a major concept. So formative assessments are really important for evaluating progress towards your targets. And that's part of why I have you turn in the backwards design template. That's why I had you kind of list out your assessments, even though you're writing those into your lesson plans, because that provides me an opportunity to kind of do a quick formative assessment on, do you really understand that your assessments have to be aligned to your targets, and that you're collecting evidence throughout the unit. So in thinking about your own units, you might check out that folder, see if there's any cool, fun ideas for maybe using a variety of assessments. We tend to rely heavily on discussions and observations. And what I know from years of teaching is that leaves gaps. And you get to the end and you have students who have managed to slide under the radar, who didn't respond to questions, who you didn't get around to observe, and they get to the summative assessment or turning in their project and they have big holes, and you're like, how did that happen, right? So thinking about how to collect even some student-specific evidence along the way is important in making sure that you're not leaving any students behind. And so I think I got to everybody's formative assessment right before class and gave you some feedback, so check in on that. Most of you did a really great job of really organizing it based on your learning targets and what you want to collect to make sure they reach those. And if there were some areas that were not described well enough, I did give you feedback. And I don't expect you to revise that and resubmit it. But what I do want to see definitely is that that feedback is incorporated in your lesson plans, and that you describe those assessments, and that you have formative assessments described in your lesson plans as we continue forward. If you have any questions about that assignment, you can stay on for a second after class. I'll be here when Courtney finishes and we can talk specifically about your paper. So any questions about that before I kind of turn it over to you guys to talk a little bit about your units? Or any questions at all about the course? I saw some really good, you're making the connections, you're really beginning to think in a way of integrating your teaching and not just putting together pieces, but really thinking about how those can be meaningfully integrated. And so I'm excited to hear about your plans and let you share those with each other so that you can learn from each other's ideas. Okay, does anybody want to volunteer to go first? Nacho, and let's see, Nacho and Morgan are working together. Morgan's like, wait a minute.
I want a new partner.
I know, right? All right, so we're doing 3 lessons that we kind of borrowed from one of the project learning trees and just like really expanded it. It starts off with like understanding resources in the forest, which is kind of something we already also did a little bit of like an idea project on from our social studies unit. So it was something we were already interested in. And this was just like how to actually incorporate it into all of the fields. So like the first lesson, Morgan, if you want to describe more of the first lesson that you kind of designed.
So it starts with literacy and science. And so to start the unit, I have 2 children's books. One of them transitions and focuses on nature, natural resources, the environment, where the second one specifically focuses on forest land managers and like shifting the mindset towards being a park ranger, which is really what our unit is about. And then it goes into classifying these scientific terms, which goes into Nacho's engineering and mathematics section of the unit.
So the mathematics portion, the second part is like, so we kind of thought of this as like how you would teach a day, like, so you'd have your literacy stuff in the morning, and then when math starts, you would plan this to go along like with your math unit of using the coordinate grid. So it starts off with like this, I found this on, you guys can all have it for free now because teachers pay teachers. So I found this Battleship game that was changed. So you kind of give your piece like, hey, who's played Battleship, yada, yada. Can anyone give me an example of how, like, you know, what it sounds like? And someone will say, you know, A2, whatever. And like, oh, the problem with Battleship is that when scientists use a grid, they actually, and you kind of explain the difference. And then you have these worksheets, Battleship worksheet games that you can do as a warm-up where they actually change it to a real coordinate grid. And you're specifically working in the first quadrant, which aligns with, I think it's the 4th grade math standard, 5th grade math standard. So we're working with 5th grade math standard. So then, you know, you all in your table groups, everyone's playing a few games of Battleship, and you have that chance to like look around and see if they're able to use the coordinate grid successfully in that aspect first. And then you kind of like, cool, so what we're actually going to be doing is, you know, you guys were learning about the forest. What we're going to be doing today is learning how to make a map of the forest with our coordinate grid. So everyone gets, I have 3 of them set out right now, 3 different maps, and then the coordinates, and then so everyone gets a set of coordinates, and the coordinates give them the outline of their map, and then the outline of a little water feature on the inside of their map. And then so the first day, it's all about like comparing and finding the areas and perimeter and stuff like that. So using the grid to get the math part done. And then the second day, or the maybe afternoon activity, however, you know, it ends up being, is the application of the engineering piece of, okay, now you are the ranger, this is a new piece of land, and this is what we need to get out of it. You have rangeland, timberland, wildlife preservation and recreation, and we need this much, at least this much of each thing. And these are some rules that you have about each thing that you have to follow. Design your spot. Did you meet parameters, checking things, and then also the final summative piece for like literature and understanding the science concept. We haven't designed the rubric yet, but would be like them describing their plot and why they decided to use it the way they did, because like the rules for how much of each thing there are pretty loose. Like they have to have at least 20 of this, 10 of this, and you know, things like that. So they get to choose what resource was most valuable to them. So they get to decide, this is why I thought that we should have the forest like this. So that kind of plays in that whole having value and then getting higher into Bloom's taxonomy for the final. So that's the idea.
Well done. Anybody have questions or comments for Morgan or Nacho?
Where is the Battleship thing? Where can I find that?
I'll attach it. It's not onto our lesson plan yet, but I'll attach it. It was on teachers pay teachers, but I'll attach it so you guys don't have to pay the $3.
Oh, so you paid for it. That's what you were saying.
I paid $3 whole just so I was too lazy to design that grid myself.
Hey, that's using your
And the
research.
little images and everything, yeah.
Well, I appreciate your sacrifice. Thanks for sharing.
Yes.
So just as kind of practice for feedback, I want you to think about what Morgan and Nacho shared and see if you can pick out what are some of the STEM attributes that are incorporated in their lessons. So thinking about, we had community involvement, we had, is this relevant, real life problem solving? Does it incorporate all of the different areas? So where do you see if you can pick out some of those attributes.
Are they supposed to say things?
I think this is where they say good things.
I hope so.
This is where you say, well done
On this.
connecting to the community.
Well done. Well, I liked, one of the things that I liked is how you definitely integrated all the STEM pieces, and the fact that you took it as this is what we would do in the course of a whole day, rather than thinking of it as here's a 1-hour lesson that I'm trying to accomplish, so that it rolled over into the next part of the day and the next like from science to engineering to math to whatever. So I think that was a good way to think about it overall, that it's not a 1-hour lesson. It is literally something that you're building on throughout the entire day.
So I'm looking at your lesson plan that you guys uploaded, and I really liked about that you guys have it looks like a little checklist, as well as some exit tickets, and I really like your exit tickets. I know you didn't talk about it, but looking at it on the Google Drive, yeah, I just feel like you guys did a great job with your exit tickets, and they're clear and concise, and they're thought-provoking, and they relate really well to what the lesson talks about each day. Okay.
I had some Forest Service experiences. I think kind of the one reason we kind of went this way, and like one other way that you could do technology is there's pretty easy to get your hands on GIS equipment from the actual Forest Service and do partnerships. I'm pretty sure they would be more than happy to send a couple of field tech kids out for a day to show a bunch of kids how to make a polygon and calculate it with the technology.
Well, I'll say one of the things that I really admired about this unit was the local relevant connections that it made to things that students in our state would be exposed to, and how forest management is a big deal in Oregon. It's a big resource that we have done better than some other places at managing, and we will have to continue to do that. It also provides a lot of connections to different kinds of engineering and science that I don't think kids really think about in terms of, oh, this is a scientist or this is an engineer, or someone who is managing the forests. We wouldn't really think about them as an engineer, or most kids wouldn't. So really like the way that it made those relevant connections for students in Oregon, and locally connected. And yes, bringing in those local community agencies will make that a really strong STEM unit and make it much more interesting. And you might even have a parent who has some experience that could come in and talk about that, bringing in students' culture. And so, well done unit. I think you guys really were creative, and I like that you double dipped and thought about what you were doing with other classes, because that's what teachers do. And I think the partnership between the two of you working together on this unit really reflects how it works in the classroom or in the schools. Is you partner with other elementary teachers, and you use your strengths to support this integrated learning. So maybe Nacho has more experience with the math and the technology connection, and so he designs that portion of the lesson, and Morgan has the social studies and the community aspects, and that way you get a much more robust unit. So good collaborative work and building on your strengths. Okay, thank you for being brave and going first, even if it was reluctantly, Morgan.
Thank you, Nacho, for being brave.
Who would like to go second?
Bravery is one of the kindest words in the English language for stupidity.
So true.
I can go next.
Thank you, Susie.
I'll be the second stupid one in the class. So I built this off of the project learning tree that I used before. That was all about planning an ideal community. I have to say though, as I wrote through all these lessons, I found that I needed probably 5 or 6 lessons actually to get the whole unit in, but just based on what I felt was the background information that they needed before they could get to the point where they were planning a map of their community. So I started the first lesson with science and literacy and all about finding water where we have water throughout the earth, and categorizing things by their properties. So in the first lesson, they're talking about, they're learning about the states of matter. And they're, once they kind of learn about that, they're doing kind of a scavenger hunt throughout the class. Oh, this is for second grade, by the way. They're doing a scavenger hunt throughout the classroom to try to find examples of things that fall under one of those the categories. And I stuck with the just 3 main states of matter rather than going into plasma and all that. And then we've done this whole approach kind of as where is water on the earth. So we went from large scale earth size things, and then throughout the lessons, we bring it into like state size or city size, and then finally bring it into community right within like the boundaries of our school. So they learned about water and the states of matter. Then we started talking about community, which builds on knowledge that they received in kindergarten. Actually, they start talking about community. So it's kind of reviewing that. And then there's a book in that one where after we read it, they're working with partners to figure out what kinds of things they recognize in the community. And I built in a piece that they could actually take maps and go outside within our community and see what kinds of things they can find within their own community, things that are recognizable to them. In that second lesson, I added a math piece because we do a class master list on different things that they think might be important in a community. And so that's when they start getting into making pictographs or bar graphs for that information. We talk about, in that unit, we talk a little bit more about services and natural resources, although goods and services and things like that actually come a little bit later, I think, in the year and as they go into second grade. So it's kind of an introduction to those kinds of things, but they're learning about what are natural resources. They're learning about concepts of maps kind of through the whole thing in order to prepare them for lesson 4, which would actually be creating their maps. And then they become engineers, and we kind of talk about the engineering process, the engineering design process, and how through all of these lessons, they've kind of been following it without knowing that they were following it. And then in the third lesson, they actually start to design their ideal communities that they will then map in the next lesson. So broad summary, I guess.
That was a very concise and good summary. And I think one of the things that I've seen in a lot of your work is the integration of other really important social studies concepts. So community, second grade is all about, through the whole year, you're studying communities. And so using that as a theme to support the science, the math, the engineering is really the only way you'll get to teach it, is to make sure that you're making those connections. So,
well, I actually found that to be challenging in doing this, because the project learning tree lesson plan to me was more of a social studies lesson. So to try to find, okay, how do you bring in those science pieces or engineering pieces, I actually found that to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. And I think in this case, it's a little less clear how those support science and, but I think you did a good job of talking about the states of matter and the natural resources. So you're actually covering two different science content standards. And then engineering the ideal community, or even creating the maps, those are civil engineering jobs. So any comments for Susie on hers, on where you see the STEM attributes that I didn't just mention?
Also, just really like the social focus of like how you kind of, being an engineer is more just about building something. It's about building something like with a purpose, like how you kept that part in mind the whole time, that this is for your community. This is like, I asked, just keeping that community aspect and the purpose in mind for those younger kids to know that they have that option, like that people do design their community. Like that's the thing, like someone did design and decided to put a park right next to this place, where someone decided, like, maybe not at that level, but you could even adapt this for older kids and be like, you know what, someone put a liquor store in your neighborhood and they didn't put it in theirs. Like, I think that's something that I easily could get to that level for those older kids.
One thing I did like was that you had them draw a community. I've actually done this in the STEM lab, but what I recommend is doing it on graph paper, because when you do it on a plain paper, kids just think you're just drawing a picture. But when you put it on the graph paper, it really gets them into that engineering mindset and thinking about placement. And then they actually look at the grid and go, oh, I want it to be this many squares away from this. And they start really aligning things more.
Great suggestion. And I find that to be true as well.
Totally see what you mean about, where you could easily have, 6 lessons here. Your closing activity, like, to me, I get so many, there's so many things you can use that for, it doesn't have to end with this unit that work on community stuff. I'm thinking of the attributes matrix and all the ways that kids could use their plans to get into that, forming partnerships with business and industry and such that, are locally grounded. Like, there's so many directions you could keep moving with that. So yeah, I like that.
That really is. Oh, go ahead, Courtney.
Kind of building off of what Isaiah said, it kind of reminded me of something I did when I was in elementary school that I completely forgot about until Isaiah's comment. We actually were assigned a different building to construct, and then we, as a class, made a community together. So that's another thing you could do too. So each student is in charge of, and it was like, mine was made of like a milk carton and stuff like that. And so it was like a little house thing, and it had a deck on it, and we made a community with that. Just another idea.
Oh, I like that. I think kids would really enjoy that. And really the biggest challenge of teaching is finding the time to get done what you want, right? And not, I mean, you could do so much with this, but always time is the constraint. But yeah, but obviously, Courtney, you still remember doing that project. And so it was meaningful and it had an impact on you. And that's the kind of activities we want students to be engaged in, is that, oh, wow, I got to build a fake, like a ideal community. And yeah. So any other last comments for Susie?
Well, I'm taking that one step further. Like, I know one of the teachers here in town, like she used to do that same thing, but the kids would get big refrigerator boxes and stuff like that. So they would actually construct a refrigerator box as like a post office or a store and everything like that. And they would set it around their desk, which is kind of important in this day and age. And so they would live like that wherever they put it in the classroom. They would build the map for it. And then those kids who were like, say they were the post office, they would get mail from the other kids and distribute it to the other students and stuff like that. And so they would live like this for, a period of time in the classroom, and then they would all change throughout the year. And the kids absolutely loved it. And like all the kids were fighting over this one teacher to be in her classroom because that's what she did every year. So pretty cool.
Oh, and you just think about how much you can go with that. Like all the kids have jobs and you have your own whole community that's developed, exchanging, goods and services. Like you really give them an opportunity to experience a micro community. Yeah. Those are the classrooms I wanted to be in too. All right. Thank you, Susie. Who's up next?
I'll go next. So my unit, I had to completely change because I just could not make the connections with the first part of it. So I decided to build off of the literacy unit and work with Critter Lake. So I did Coyote in Love, which is a book I introduced to like everybody before, just to introduce Critter Lake to fourth graders, because part of what they do in fourth grade is like learn about Oregon. And one of the problems that's facing Critter Lake is water quality and resources that are being taken away from the Mazama Newt. And so I uploaded everything to the Google Docs. And my first lesson is just introducing them to that problem. So I read them the book. I show a little blurb from the National Park Service about how the crawfish were introduced in 1914. And now then they're like eating all of the natural resources for the Mazama Newt. And now then they're going, oh no, we have a real problem on our hands type of situation. And they also watch a video. I don't know how many have like kids. I know Leah does, and I think Susie does too. But there's a show called The Axel Show that's on YouTube. And they actually went and caught crawfish up at Crater Lake and then cooked them. So I don't know. I think I might have to like, if I were to show this, I don't know if I could show them actually like cooking and eating the crawdads, but maybe. It would just depend on if they deemed that like mean or whatever. So they get to see that. And then the next lesson that we'll go into is actually like how crawdads sense food and find their food. And then they'll label a diagram, about the parts of the crawfish, so they know like what parts the crawfish use to find their food, how they sense their food, and everything like that. And then the next lesson that we go into, lesson number 3, they actually design a trap. So they'll design the trap with blueprints and everything like that. There's a couple of videos that I put on there that they'll have like all different recyclables to use for their trap. And then the 4th lesson is them actually putting it together and setting it. And then I'm gonna actually have to do a 5th lesson where we find out like which baits were the best. So they'll have baits like cucumbers, lettuce, cat food, rotten chicken, stuff like that they're attracted to. And then the kids will decide, like they'll all vote on which bait that they think is going to be the best bait and go from there. One of the things though that I'm kind of having problems with is I don't know ideally if a school district would actually let us like just drive out to one of the rivers here and leave the traps overnight, or if that would be something that I would have to do as a teacher myself. I know one of the schools out in Chiloquin, the river is actually right behind them where they have a lot of crawfish. So we could test it there with no problem, but that would only be school specific. So I don't, one way or another we could get it done, but I don't know the logistics of like actually putting it into a school and having a school let us take a bunch of fourth graders out to the river and set crawdad traps. And then, like I said, the last lesson, I have to put it together still because I couldn't finish it up in like 4 lessons. Will just be them gathering all the data from how many crawfish were caught in each trap and seeing which bait was the best.
So Evelyn, you did a good job of kind of revising your whole unit, and this one definitely is much more aligned with the science and clearly connected to that. So good job on doing that in a short amount of time and thinking through that. And I think this is a really engaging, locally based, again, when we think about those STEM attributes, it's actually addressing a local problem. It's giving the students an opportunity to see how scientists really work in the world, biologists and how they manage species, habitat, all of that. And I would definitely recommend that you consider it's possible. We do field trips all the time with schools to streams where they do different kinds of field experiments. But I would definitely suggest that you work with your local Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to have them participate and talk about, you know, the benefits and the consequences of doing any kind of interaction with wildlife. So, and they're really good about doing that and telling you where to go, how to do it, you know, giving information that would benefit the kids' construction of those traps and even talking about how that's done. So looks like Nacho has a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Fish and Wildlife would be an awesome resource because crawdads are an invasive species in most places. I know specifically in Eastern Oregon, there's no limit in a lot of wetland areas, and they encourage you to trap and catch as many crawdads as you can. So like to have that piece, like for kids to have that understanding, like that this is a thing and like that it's a real issue that they can make an impact on is really cool.
Yeah, and that's the thing up there is they're an invasive species. They were never there. Somebody just was like, oh, here, let's bring them in because that's awesome. And now then they're finding that they're hurting the water quality. They're endangering the newt that is actually a native species. So yeah, I would definitely source with Fish and Wildlife. But like I said, I just really kind of pulled this all together kind of at the last minute because my other one just completely fell apart. I just couldn't make the connections on it. So that's good.
Courtney has a hand up.
Another thing you could do, if you weren't able to go out with the kids and trap them, or after you guys trap them, you can do a kiddie pool in the classroom of crawdads. They survive pretty well in a kiddie pool. I had one in my science class in elementary school, and then you can do a whole unit on it where they learned about the different parts of, we say crayfish in Minnesota, different parts of a crayfish and like all the, like how they move, what they eat, and you just watch them and you can pick them up and play with them. Again, this is another thing I remember from elementary school, and they just survive in a little kiddie pool. They're really cheap kiddie pools, so.
See, and I thought about doing that, but I was trying to think of how you would have like 7 crawfish traps. So, you know, a tank big enough to where they would have like a choice of which trap to go into. And I don't know if I could fit 7 crawfish traps in a kiddie pool. So I was sitting there like, I'm like, oh my gosh, how big is this tank gonna have to be for them to like actually have a choice of which one to go in?
You can have 2.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
Or test a couple of traps at a time and just collect.
Yeah.
You could do
Underneath
like
it.
in basketball where they have the brackets
Yeah.
and then have 2 on either side of the kiddie pool. Which one do they go to?
Yeah, and see, and I just didn't, I don't know enough about crawfish habits to know, like, I know that they're like more nocturnal type of hunters. So I was thinking, okay, well, if we take the traps out to the river, because we did this in high school, we trapped crawfish at this river because it was right behind our school. So I'm like, okay, well, we could do that if I worked at this school. Like, we could actually just go to the river, set the traps, wait overnight, and then that would kind of give us a good blind idea of which bait they really liked, what trap was the best, that type of thing. So, but the kiddie pools would be a good idea too. So.
A good modification. Isaiah has his hand up.
So yeah, thinking practically, I feel like the worst case scenario would be that you get a volunteer who's willing to drive them out, set them up, and take pictures or video documenting how many are in each one, and then just send them back to the class, all the photos and videos, and have them just analyze that, which, you know, is not the ideal situation, but might be the most practical for, like, I'm thinking about my school, which is nowhere near a water source, you know, might be, and, you know, making lemons out of lemonade, you could do again, form partnerships with local industries and so on through that, and even have kids research who they could ask to do this for them, you know.
Yeah.
Great idea. I like using the video to capture the results, and that way.
Well, I'm thinking about that. We could also do like a Zoom type of thing too, or like a FaceTime thing where we actually broadcast it to the kids in class while their traps are being set. So
what
they
a
would
great
at least
use of technology.
yeah, they would have like at least they could maybe have some say on how their traps are set, you know, like, no, I don't like it that way. We wanted it more like this or whatever.
Okay, we're going to have great ideas. This is why collaboration and working and talking together is really beneficial as teachers. We're going to have to move on. So who would like to go next? I think Leo had suggested she was ready.
Hi. Okay. So I did one of the activity with the that I did previously with the greenhouse. So I kind of just started out. I just figured, I kind of switched it around. Usually you have a lesson, then you do an activity afterwards. I kind of flipped it around where I wanted to start with a project because I want to kind of pique their interest, and also it needed to be something that they did some tracking on for over a distance of time, a couple weeks or something, or a week or two.
Yes,
And
yes, I'm so glad you said that. I worked so hard to get people to see that. Do the activity, the project first, then the background. Good job.
Yeah. So that's what I want to do. So they're going to jump right in, and they're going to create with just recycled and different materials, you know, to create and build their own little greenhouses. And for the sake of time, thought I would start with like little seedlings, so small plants, and so they would already have that instead of having to wait for the seeds to sprout, and some maybe wouldn't or would or wouldn't. Anyway, so and then they would determine, so the lesson basically is determining what kind of the effects of lack of sunlight or optimum sunlight on their plants. So they're going to design their greenhouse, and that would be the main focus of the first lesson. And let's see, what did I else have involved in that lesson? That was pretty much most of it, is just introducing them to the idea of that, and then they construct it. And then the second lesson is getting more into the science of it, where the photosynthesis lesson. So that now they're going to study why the plants grow, how, you know, all the stages of photosynthesis. And so learning about that, I'm a little worried about that lesson, because I feel like maybe I need another activity to kind of solidify the activity, the steps, because, you know, to help them remember. So I started that one out with a pre-assessment, just to kind of get, I mean, they will have a slight introduction to it when on their first lesson, but wouldn't go into really the process. And so I do a pre-assessment with that, and then we would do, I found this really cool, that I thought was an interesting perspective, is it's called the imagery field trip. And basically they're visualizing, they're all closing their eyes, and I'm reading a passage of them going through the steps, like they're a plant basically, and the process that their body is going through, and what the sun's doing, and how it's bringing in water through their roots and everything. So they're imagining, they're all laying there imagining this stuff as I'm reading this passage. So that's kind of how, and then after they've went through that imagery field trip, then I would introduce a video that kind of gives them the visual part of the photosynthesis activity, you know, that kind of breaks it down, you know, kid-friendly video that was kind of cool one. And then an activity to kind of, I don't remember what I put into it. Anyways, then I think right in there would be some kind of activity that they're actually like putting, you know, putting something together to kind of help that process of physically doing. So they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and then they're doing something that is compiling the steps of the photosynthesis. And then, so that would be the second lesson. And then the third one was tying it into plants and food source, and how, you know, we're consumers, and what are consumers, what are producers. So it's just, why are plants important? Why do we need them? And haven't quite got that one figured out. Oh, and for the math and stuff, so the ongoing part of that would be more of the math lesson, which is something they do every day, which ties into them measuring their plant growth, and then it'll culminate at the end where they're doing, you know, and they're ongoing putting data into their chart that they developed, where they could either do it on their Chromebooks, or they can do it on a paper graph chart that they draw, or a template that I have. And then in the end, they're comparing with the class and their peers on, you know, what materials had the best growth, that kind of stuff, and tie it into math where they're measuring, they're finding the difference, things like that. So what else? Oh, and then the last one I thought it would have been cool for to tie in the art would be where they're creating their own, like inventing or whatever, their own plant. So basically just using art or craft supplies, they're, you know, drawing a picture or doing a little model of inventing their own little plant and labeling and, you know, describing the photosynthesis process and stuff. So just something to kind of tie in the art project. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Thanks, Leah, for giving us a kind of overview. Any questions, comments?
Well, I like too how it kind of jumped right into, I think when we're looking at the engineering design process, we think a lot about coming up with the problem, researching it, and then building something. But you kind of started with the build something, and then we have to figure out if it worked or not.
Mhm.
So I could see even at the, like, and as an extension, them going back then to what they created right at the beginning, the greenhouses, and trying to decide, do I alter my design? How would I do it differently? Kind of just bringing it full circle. But I think it's a good sort of in promoting the growth mindset too, that you might start out right at the beginning and it might fail, and it's okay. You figure it out and move on. So
Yeah.
that was cool.
I also really like how you got them engaged with the activity first. I feel like that's something we just forget, that is an option of a way to get kids thinking about the material. If it's an activity that there's no prior knowledge for, but anyone can build a greenhouse. They don't have to know the specs beforehand. They can just build it first. So that is a good idea.
Well, and to use the information they're gaining about photosynthesis and plant production throughout the unit to then go back and, as Susie said, to modify their greenhouse design to better produce the plant that they desired. And I like the art integration as well. And sorry, guys, we're going to have to move on because I see Courtney's already zooming. We've got 2 more groups. So I'm going to cut you off a little, Leah.
No, that's fine.
We'll get back. You'll get feedback from your peers in the other way. So, okay, who would like to go next? Danielle and Courtney?
We'll be quick, Isaiah, don't worry. Courtney, why don't you start, since this is kind of your idea?
Okay, just keep it super concise. We started out the first day kind of talking about, ours is about weather. So we're talking about what students know about weather, what their past knowledge on weather is, what they think about with weather. And then we're gonna go dive right into our engineering project, which is to create a rain gauge. So the students are gonna be working in groups. In each group, one member is gonna be in charge of making a rain gauge using a certain type of material. And they're going to, at the end, test it, figure out which one is the best type to hold water and be able to measure water. Then they're going to be setting these out, and we're going to be measuring how much rain is collected each day. And we're going to have scientific journals where we're making entries each day, where students are going to record how much water was in the rain gauge. They're going to look outside to see, is it rainy, is it sunny, is it windy? Before they do that, that's going to be in between lessons. They're actually going to be watching a YouTube video about how to be a weather watcher. So they're going to be thinking about the things that they see in the video and kind of doing that in between science lessons. And then on our second lesson, they're actually going to be graphing their data. This is where math comes in. So they're going to be using a pictograph, and they're going to be using bar graphs, and then doing data tables to take the data from how much rain and then the different types of days they saw. And then they're going to make some comparisons and analyze, which day had more rain, how many more sunny days than rainy days, and kind of like see if there's any comparisons and how they relate to each other. And then, Danielle, do you want to talk about the third day?
Sure. Well, and then did you already mention they're gonna rewatch the video? And
yeah, that's right. They're gonna rewatch the video on the second day and look for the terminologies and just kind of write down what the different scientific terminologies mean. And in the video, it talks about like meteorologists, weather patterns, different types of weather to observe: sunny, rainy, cloudy, windy, etc.
And then you're so quick. And then on the third day, we're gonna do, they're gonna compare what they collected over that 5-day period to a professional source. And so they're gonna be making comparisons and writing about it. So comparing and contrasting what they see, how accurate their rain gauge was to like a legitimate one. And then we would of course find that source for them. They wouldn't have to search that out. So that would be their writing component. They'll summarize, paraphrase the data from both, looking for differences and similarities. And then finally, which I think we'll probably edit a little bit, but we'll do some sort of like end of the unit kind of test where it would just kind of summarize everything that they've learned, the terms, the vocabulary. Each subject would have a specific question or series of questions that relate to it. And sorry, it's kind of loud. I live on a busy road, but yeah.
Well done. That was really quick. Thank you for being so quick and concise. And that's one of the benefits of going later, right? Is you get to
get it right in there.
Order, right?
Yeah.
So a couple things I really like is that you emphasize the literacy. And although have seen that in all of your other units, you were able to call that out and show how that, especially comparing and contrasting sources of information, is a really important literacy practice. And so the other thing too you mentioned is the summative assessment, and how thinking about how to design that so that it captures the learning throughout the unit. And I think you know, we often think of summative assessments like and what you see in the classroom 90% of the time is a quiz, right? Or a test, or like just answer these questions and show me you know. And we don't think about performance-based assessment as being as valid or even as part of a summative assessment. So you can collect all of that, their science journals, their data tables, and that can be your summative assessment. You don't have to create something at the end. It can be a combination of the products that they've been working on throughout the whole project. So keep that in mind. Any comments real quick for Danielle and Courtney for theirs?
I like how you incorporated the graphing skills. I feel like that's something that kids need to know how to do, and oftentimes people just are so illiterate at it. It drives me nuts when people don't know how to read graphs well. Like I do this thing with, and it's something that like I feel like if you don't teach kids early enough, they just feel like they don't know how to do it, and then it becomes they get these weird barriers in their head for when they're reading graphs and information. Like I work with a lot of high school kids that don't have those skills to accurately graph and read information, and like yeah, it's really hard to like reteach those things to kids when they already have those misconceptions in place at an older age.
Absolutely. I am so in line with that, Nacho.
I have a couple kids. It's just, especially because a lot of the kids I work with are on the autism spectrum. And like, so for instance, like something simple, like a Venn diagram even, they'll be like, nope, it's not that. And they're just like,
looks complicated and I can't understand it.
and they're just done. Yeah. And it's just like, God, like because yeah, it feels like once they reach a certain age and rigidity, like specifically reading pictures and graphs in a different way, like I don't know what it is about the part of the brain that it uses, but they really struggle with it. So good skill to promote.
And very important for our society as well.
Yeah, because then you can't read data and then you're just an illiterate buffoon.
Yep, exactly. Which is a good thing to kind of segue into Isaiah's project. So Isaiah, you ready?
Yeah, still trying to wrap my head around how to deliver this quickly though. Let's see. So the different pieces I'm playing with here are opinions supported with reasons, picture graphs, biological diversity and what makes one organism more likely to survive than another, and then generating and comparing multiple solutions to a problem and deciding which ones are more likely to be more effective. So with that, the first lesson is my notion was to bring in a local ecologist with soil samples and start with kids, table groups digging through the samples and identifying organisms within them and tracking on picture graphs what organisms they're identifying, so that then working together to make a collaborative picture graph just describing the species diversity of their sample, to introduce the notion of ecology as studying relationships between organisms and environment and so on. That's the first lesson. Moving from there into the more PLT bit, which was discussing how coloration of bugs affects how likely they are to survive in an environment. So then that's a little game where you spread out a bunch of different colored bugs, red, green, and yellow, and the lawn or whatever, and have kids race to pick up a bug, and then you will look and see what colors of bug were most likely to be picked up and which were most likely to not get picked up. Moving from there in that lesson to kids actually using what they learned to design on their Chromebooks their own bugs, their own colors, their own patterns, their own what have you, with their classroom as their imagined environment. What bug would be most likely to survive in the classroom? They make their designs, and then they write a little, opinion piece of which of their designs they think is most likely to work and why. And then the last lesson is, you actually hide all those bugs in the classroom. The instructor does, and you play the same game in the classroom where each kid's trying to find bugs quickly. And then you use that data to have kids evaluate, okay, which of my designs actually did work the best? And so then they reflect on their opinion from the previous day, reflect on whether or not their picture graph aligns with their opinion that they formed the previous day, and then reflect on how maybe after they played the game and saw how their classroom really worked, what they could do to improve one of their designs to make it more effective in the classroom. And that's kind of the thing right now. Yeah.
You did so great summarizing that so quickly. I am so proud of you, Isaiah. I think I should have, well, I do have that on recording. I'm going to have to go back and watch that, because I'll tell you, the description of his lessons was 7 or 8 pages long. That was just his assessment. So well done summarizing. I'm proud of you. And I want to be in your class. Like, I want to do that activity. I think that sounds amazing and fun and creative, and it actually really aligns with every one of the standards you mentioned. So that's my feedback. Courtney has something to say.
If you can't get outside, I think you should do a bug off in Animal Crossing.
Nacho had some comments.
If whatever this would be an awesome lesson to align with your other classroom teachers, like your grade level teachers in your school. And then that way kids switch and kids become the finders in other classrooms. So they're not looking for bugs they know about. And then you could be like non-bias, how to do non-bias research.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Excellent. Yeah. Great.
Bug off. I like the bug off. Let's find these bugs. I'm into it.
If we were in
Isaiah
class,
and I
I
both
would
play that
say we
game.
would totally do that. If we were in class together, we would totally do this lesson. So. And I would say even the bugs and worms activity, the PLT activity, is the favorite always every year when we do it with 3rd graders outdoors, is they love hunting for the worms in the grass and doing the relay. So. All right, well done. I am excited to see the final products of your units. I think you had all really great integrated plans and got some good ideas for maybe from each other. And I will update the to-do list for the feedback. And any last questions before I turn it over to Courtney? Only 5 minutes late, Courtney. Like I said, I'll be back. I'll join in at the end of class. So if anybody has any final questions or wants to talk about their particular unit, I'll stay on for a few minutes or we can set up another time to do that. Courtney, do you want me to give them a break, or are you going to jump right in?
Okay, I'm going to just let you know what we're doing today so you just know, and then I'm going to give you a break. So we're going to do 2 things. The first thing is I want you guys to chat and share about what you're finding in the journal project, which is like, when I say share, we're going to do that in a condensed amount of time. And then the second thing, and this is like probably not as fun. So, hey, Karla, can you make me a, whatever it's called, where I can assign groups, an in charge person?
Absolutely.
And then the second thing you're going to do is we're going to do an activity. You're going to work in a partnership, and you're going to do some assessment and kind of like a mini practice for task 4 in the Ed TPA, because the reality is you're going to be expected to do that as part of your licensure. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to do that work together today. So you're going to have time to work on that. And I'll go over that in a few moments. So it is like 11:07 or 11:08, depending on your watch. I'll see you in like 10 minutes. Have a good break.
Courtney, you might want to just stop the recording for the break.
Oh, yeah, that. The recording before I forget. Okay, so let's start. And I want to hear about your journal project and what articles are popping out to you as useful or helpful, or what are your thoughts? You should have started already.
My mic's on, so I guess I'll go ahead and share one. The stuff that I found more interesting is stuff that's definitely like classroom like styles and management ideas. And so the one that I have is classroom routines. It's an innovation for discourse. It's just like different ideas for ways to use continuing math activities that are just inspire more thinking than just traditional rote learning. The 4 that it gives you, the first routine is number talk images. That's just a way to help kids like picture numbers and think of them in different ways. And then the ones I really like are like using a game like Would You Rather, and then working on estimation skills. I really like the Would You Rather best. That was kind of my favorite one, because that's just something that helps kids have a choice in something and then helps them use that math skill at the same time in more fun interaction.
Yeah.
Easy warm-ups, that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there were 2 that I kind of liked. One was, I just had not heard of that SketchUp Made program. So I thought that was just a fun way for kids to kind of explore and have another way to sort of see things in 3D without actually holding something. But the other one was sort of just a good reminder to me in the Think, Pair, Share, and that was to build in wait time when you're teaching things, that rather than trying to jump in and give kids the answer, it's actually giving them time to think through what it is that they're trying to articulate, and maybe help with revoicing or restating what they're saying to try to build that understanding.
It's hard to remember wait time, especially when you're newer to the profession, or if you are feeling like a push to really cover content. It's very easy to want to just kind of get in the flow and like feed the answer so that you can move on. But I really encourage you to really keep that in the forefront for sure. That's a great point. Anybody else?
One of the articles I was looking at talks a lot about like reflecting after the lessons, and I specifically jotted one down that I liked. It was like a spider web that he made, and so I think it said like big ideas, and it said something else, and then each student or group kind of shared, and I think it was a man, wrote it down off of the web. And I just thought that was kind of cool, because I think it's a good reminder to like reflect and talk about what the students, what stood out to them. And then it also helps you. It's like, okay, so this really stood out, and then this whole part they didn't get, or, whatever needs to be retaught maybe. And I think you can just like learn a lot based off what the feedback is. So I really like that.
And when you're thinking about formative assessment, which I know you guys kind of talked about with Karla, like that is a really good concrete way to see, okay, well, I thought, my learning target was this. But when I pull them all back for that debrief and I'm sketching out what they're saying, they, went in a whole opposite direction or only had part of it, like you're saying. So that would really allow you to be intentional about, okay, so how am I going to get there in the next lesson, or what do we need to reteach, or where were they confused? In the work that you did with the misconception lesson, or I'm sorry, the differentiation lesson where you looked at the Eureka Math curriculum, I hope you noticed that at the end of almost all the lessons in that curriculum, they have a debrief section in it, like embedded. And that is the part that because I taught Eureka Math for 5-6 years, that's the part where you want to just skip it because you have other things to do, lack of time, right? But that is a very valuable tool, especially when we're thinking about that summative assessment is very important. Karla talked about, using that, but also that formative assessment. How are we going to continue to take stock of what's going on in the classroom? So excellent, yeah. Anyone else? Our next person.
The one that I found that I really enjoyed was catalyzing change. And the title is very, it's very misleading. It says for elementary school, but then at the introduction of it, it primarily talks about high school and changing the misconception in high school. But really, as you go through it, it talks about instructional strategies to kind of focus on the mathematical discourse for elementary school and how that transitions into high school. The way it's laid out, it has 8 steps that is more structural for mathematics in elementary school and how to instruct it and how to kind of increase conceptual development. But it was interesting, and I think it can be applied to all of us in terms of grade level.
Yeah, and I'm hoping you're seeing that in the articles and topics that are covered in this, that while they might be talking about a specific grade level, you can expand those across grade levels and areas in mathematics for sure.
I really liked, it was either Angle Detective or Detective Angle. I think it was Angle Detective. And it's where the kids take out pattern blocks and measure the different angles with a protractor. And then they're also allowed to take multiple pattern blocks and create bigger angles and see what they can discover that way. So one child put 4 square pattern blocks together and noticed that he could make a circle 360-degree angle with it. And then another child took 2 pattern blocks and made a line and found out that a line was 180. So this is a way that students can just kind of figure that out on their own prior to just telling them what it is, and like the angle measurements for generic shapes of like the standard shapes for each side, like number of sides. They can figure that out on their own first.
One of the ones I liked, because it was, at first glance, kind of a silly thing to write an article about, frankly, was the animals in the mathematics classroom one, where it kind of just gripes about these different animal-related tips and tricks and shortcuts for different math concepts, and why they're a waste of time when you could actually be teaching the math concepts, which got me thinking about a lot of different things, like why do we use these things? Why do we use these little tips and tricks in the first place? Why do we bother with these? And for me, it's like part of it is that this is how we were taught math. These little tips and tricks, not for understanding, which means in a weird way, these tips and tricks are how we understand the math. We don't really understand the math the way that we're supposed to have our kids understand it. But then the other thing is that, if you're in an upper grade, like you often get kids who don't have the math skills and such that they're expected to have at that grade level. And it is really tempting to, instead of actually helping them build those foundational skills they need, to try to give them the shortcuts so that they can catch up and get into, but they end up, of course, never learn the foundational concepts, if we use these shortcuts that way. So that's why I like that.
Yeah, right? Because think about it, like a lot of the things that teachers rely on are exactly what you're saying, those shortcuts, because they don't have the conceptual understanding. So how do we support students who also lack that? Like, what can we do besides relying on a tip or a trick?
I can remember being so frustrated that I had a math teacher in high school that spent a ridiculous amount of time teaching us in calculus what an interval was, and for us to understand that concept, and then eventually taught us the trick. Like, oh, why didn't you just teach us that? It's like, well, then you would have never learned what an interval is. Like, and that was just so frustrating. But like, I still understand it, and I know people that just learned the little trick how to calculate intervals don't really know what they mean. So I think like that's a good point. Like that little trick is just an enabler and something that we've done forever to pass kids along the math line that hasn't helped anything.
Well, and if you think about, so there has been a lot of griping about, especially in like second grade, when you teach students to add and subtract using place value and like a hundreds, tens, and ones chart, and parents all want to rush, not, I shouldn't say all parents, but often I have heard as an elementary school teacher, like, I just want to teach them the regular way, the standard algorithm, right? But in doing that, you're really missing the opportunity to make sure the students actually understand that, you know, that one that is in the tens place is worth 10 and not 1, right? The conceptual understanding behind it. And so I think that there's value, right, in learning all the parts of an integer and then the trick, or working on that place value mat and then work moving towards the algorithm for sure. Evelyn, Leah, what stuck out to you? And then we're gonna move on to some work time.
Trying to look at something. I mean, I had read about I actually went on a tangent and started reading too many things and looking at too many resources. But one of the things that was, yeah, it was just like, you know, you go into it and 3 hours later, it's like, oh wait. But one of the things that article was interesting in there was something that I've actually, interesting because it's something I've done a lot. and a lot of curriculums have done was the ineffective keyword strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just that whole idea of that, because that's something that we definitely, I mean, I know multiple curriculums that actually use those as focuses, you know, that we pull out and have charts of and all that stuff. So the idea that is not necessarily, because it can be abstract and not necessarily apply in each case, having certain keywords that they're relating to, you know. So I found that one to be interesting. Something I'm gonna have to research more into that, because I definitely have done that a lot.
Well, because you think about that too, especially when students start thinking about multi-step word problems.
Yeah, because that's one of the ways that, you know, we use to identify what to do.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with like, it's important for students to understand mathematical vocabulary and how that fits. Like, that's not negating that, but yeah, we don't want them to just see like, oh, you see this, that means this all the time, because that rule expires.
That are set as opposed to the ones that don't necessarily mean that. So it can cause confusion and stuff. So
yeah, for sure. Excellent point. Evelyn?
One of the articles I found was just on using manipulatives. So it was starting with like pre-kindergarten and kindergarten kiddos, and just kind of using like different bottle caps and things like that to help them count, or to make structures with, like shapes, and just kind of reusing stuff that we have like around the house or around the classroom every day. Just to help them, you know, have that hands-on approach, as well as they're not really, it's kind of like they're not really thinking about math, but they're doing all of the mathematical stuff still. So they're getting that introduction to it, to go into kindergarten. So I thought that was interesting, because I've noticed like more and more they're starting earlier and earlier to get the kids ready for school. And so I think that's because I taught Head Start before. So they don't really focus on like the outcomes in Head Start. Like they focus on the process. And so that's kind of how this was like they're using, you know, bottle caps to count and to find numbers and things like that. So I thought it was interesting that they're kind of upping the ante some more going into kindergarten.
That made me think of, so I have a friend who lives in Colorado, and she went to, and I'm going to have to ask her where it is, and if she has a resource, I'll email it to all of you, but she went to this counting library. That's probably not what it's called, but it had like sets of like 1,000 bottle caps. So kids could actually see like, what does 1,000 actually look like? Because we talk about it and we move place value chips around, but like, what does that visually look like? Or, you know, 150, whatever, like all of these different kinds of manipulatives and objects in groups so that kids could really like visualize what they're working with and thinking about. And she was like, this is so cool. And I was like, yeah, totally cool. It also makes my like need to organize part of me freak out because I would need them all, you know, like organized. But
I just rather get the book.
Yeah.
Because there's a book like that, and I forget what it's called, but I think it is something like that. It's like, what does that look like, or something like that, where it shows you a picture of like 1,000 jelly beans or 500 jelly beans or whatever. Yeah. And I can imagine like actually keeping 1,000 bottle caps. Like I don't know how many Ziploc bags that would go into.
Right.
But that's a lot.
Right. Yeah, and so it's really because I think we often want to move away from the concrete for kids. Like that's often, I think, part of unknowingly teachers do that when they want to get rid of, you know, move past manipulatives really quickly because of the hassle of like having the items and having you know, but I really think there's power in that tangible visual and concrete and having kids actually touch things and manipulate them. So we're gonna, so thank you for sharing that. We're gonna shift gears a little bit. So you are going to be in partnerships. And what I'm gonna have you do is, if you look on, hold on, I'm sharing my screen. You never know if it's gonna happen. Can you see? Yes, yes, okay. So when you look in our Moodle, I want you to download the EdTPA scoring guide. It's blank, it's a blank rubric, and I don't think you can see, you can't see what I just shifted to, can you? Why does it do that? What you're going to do is you're going to, I just want you to look at this scoring guide, and you're going to see that it goes from exceeds, right, meets, developing, and does not meet. And you're going to use this template. You're not going to have to fill it out. I'm going to explain how you're going to record your results in a minute. But you're going to be thinking about 3 areas when analyzing student work: procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, and problem solving and reasoning, okay? So those are the 3 areas that you're going to be thinking about as you, with your partner, analyze student work. Now, I have 3 different samples for you that you can choose from. So with your partner, you guys decide what you want. I tried to have a variety of choices for you. In the kindergarten and first grade option, you're gonna see that this option is in a dual language, bilingual classroom. You're also going to notice that in the 3rd grade, you're going to watch videos where the student has done the calculation and then they voice over what they were thinking and how they were using that, doing the work, okay? So in your partnership, what you're going to do is you'll see that there is a link here. It says it's called Assessment and Reteaching. And when you click on that, you're going to have a Google form. And so with your partner, I just want you to record your names, tell me what work you're analyzing. And then you have, remember that rubric I just showed you? I want you to look at the tasks and I want you to think about how did that task show conceptual understanding and what would the criteria then be for an exceeds, meets, developing, does not meet. And I want you to go through that process for also procedural fluency and reasoning or problem solving, okay? Now, if you're looking at one of those tasks and you think this does not address procedural fluency at all, that's okay. You need to just explain to me why you're thinking on that, right? Like if you think that that task does not assess an area, that is an okay judgment call to make. I personally am not set up this is real work that I've gotten from teachers. And so I want you to just share with me what you're seeing. So that's the first step. The second step then is I want you to look at that student work and I want you to identify an area that the student really struggled, right? Like what's going on here? Where is that struggle? And then based on that conversation you have with your partner and where you identify as their area of struggle, I want you to write a learning objective for the next lesson. Because when you are doing task 4 for the EdTPA, you are going to be expected to look at a piece of student work, identify procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, problem solving, where those are present, identify the area of struggle that the student had, and then create a lesson or, do a reteach, right? Task 4 is about this reteach. And so I want to give you an opportunity to work with your partner to start thinking about doing that work. And that Google form in its entirety is due July 30th. But I want you to start working on that today. So that's what you're going to be doing for the rest of your time. If you have, I think I'm going to just like randomly assign you to a partner. Does that work for you? Or is there, I don't really have a preference. If you have a partner you want to work with, if there's somebody you were already working with in Karla's class, like.
Morgan's always mean to me and we don't work well together.
Okay,
Just
so you
kidding.
don't want to be with Morgan.
No, it's literally a joke.
Nacho treats me very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry for you want to. Okay.
We'd be happy to work together if you
Okay.
No, please put us together is what we're saying.
I know, I got it. Got it.
Sarcasm.
I'm just going to pipe in here and say, until you can learn to work together, I'm going to keep putting you together.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I'm putting them together. Is there anyone else? Speak now. Okay, good to know. I literally am just going down the list. Hey, Karla, who do you want to have a partner with? I'm kidding. Okay, go.
I'm not sure how long you're going to put them in there, but you might want to stop the recording.
Okay, so sorry that my computer died and I couldn't visit you all quickly. So that activity, you're looking at your assessment that needs to be completed by the 30th at midnight. Remember that you only need to turn in one Google form that has both of your names on it. And I hope that you have found this like valuable to get your brain thinking about what will be expected of you for licensure, the assessment. I'm not one to want to teach towards an assessment, but I do think it's valuable that you have some practice for when you do task 4. So Karla, your turn if you have anything to say.
Actually, Courtney, I have a question. So on the thing, are we describing what a 4 is, what a 3 is, okay, so it's going to take a while.
So you need to, so Isaiah clarified this too. You're looking at this assessment kind of through 2 lenses. So your first lens is you're looking at the assessment itself, right? So like what the task that was set before these students, and you're thinking about conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and problem solving. And then in the context of that, what would a 4, what would a, what would an exceeds look like? What would a nearly meets look like? What would a meets look like? And then after you have established your criteria, then you're going to look at the student's work in that task, and you're going to identify an area of struggle. And then you're going to determine, based on that area of struggle, what your next learning target would be. So like, what would I do moving forward? Because that's really what task 4 is all about, is you're analyzing student work, and then you're designing your reteach.
Are we trying to pick the most common learning deficit of the group because of the kids that we had?
In your samples?
Yeah, the most common learning.
What would you do in the classroom?
That's what I'm just making sure, because they all have very different. I don't know if you want us to pick one specific student to do a reteach. No,
so if you're going to do a reteach of a whole group, right?
Gotcha.
Okay, as soon as I'm done in class, I'll put them away. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I mean, obviously you want to address.
So you're looking at all 4 or all the students in the sample and making that determination
for that small group
based on all of those kids. Okay.
Yep.
So we're not just picking one. All right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because that's what you're going to do in the classroom.
In the classroom, right? Yeah.
So a small group of students.
As if it's a small group. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you would do. You would want to say, okay, how can I support all of these students? So any other questions? Yes, no? Okay. Okay, now I'm done, Karla, for real. It's your turn.
That was perfect timing. Thank you for finishing up on time. And I don't have anything else other than just to remind you to do the course evaluations. And if there's anybody who wants to talk through something about their unit or feedback that I gave them on their assessments or anything, I'll stick around for a couple minutes and see. Otherwise, it was great working with all of you. Susie, you have a question?
Well, yeah, on our units, when we have things like exit tickets or things like that, do we have to create those to attach them?
Yes, you do. You do
Okay.
have to include instructional materials and assessment documents.
Okay.
And so, attach those to, I would prefer one document where those are at the end of it rather than multiple files, just because it's a lot easier for me to
Okay.
grade. But if you have something that you're using that's already designed and you can't attach it, then you can use it as a separate file.
I like made some of the maps and stuff, Karla, like the models that we'll be using. Is it okay? We just have like an attachment to PDF so they're a little easier to read than just inserts onto the same document.
Yeah, that's fine. Just try to minimize the number of files.
And I just wanted to echo really quickly what Karla said. We really enjoyed working with you this term. It was kind of weird because we're all online. My sense of humor doesn't translate over the internet like I hope. Thank you for a great term, and we really have enjoyed working with you. So yeah, good luck in the fall. You're almost done. You're getting there.
Courtney, I have a couple of clarifying questions about the article thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the journal project. So for the summaries, you just want it to kind of look like how we did for Karla's, where it's just like 2 sentences, you kind of summarizing what we read, and then like 2 sentences about why we chose it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you want us to also echo the or copy over the table of contents, or no? No. Okay. Just clarifying.
And remember, the goal of this journal project is not for you to like recreate the journal. It's that I want you to pick out the items that are going to be the most useful for you in your practice, right? So Isaiah's collection or his project might, I mean, you're all working in the same year, right? But his is going to be different than yours because you guys are going to see things differently for your own practice in the classroom. So yeah, that's the goal. Any other questions about that, about the reteach activity? No? Okay. I think we're done, unless you want to talk to Karla.
Unless you want to stay and chat with me, you're free to go. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Have a good
Yes,
summer.
thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Do you want me to stop the recording, Karla?
Yes, please.